My mother-in-law adopted my child behind my back. That sentence still burns when I say it out loud. Even now, years later, it doesn't sound real, like I'm reciting someone else's nightmare. But it happened. It happened to me. It started on a gray morning in late November. The kind of morning when the light itself feels tired, like the sun didn't really want to rise. I remember the faint hum of the hospital machines, the antiseptic smell that clung to my clothes, and the cold metal chair that had molded itself to my exhaustion. My son, Daniel, was 6 then. Small, fragile, and far too brave for a child who had learned the language of pain before he could spell his own name. He'd been in the hospital for 3 weeks, fighting a severe infection that had spread faster than any of us could understand. I hadn't left his side. Not once. But that morning, my mother-in-law, Evelyn, walked in with her usual grace. Her hair pinned neatly, her pearl earrings catching the sterile light. Even in grief, she was poised. "You need to rest, sweetheart," she'd said softly, setting down a thermos of soup she'd made. "You'll collapse before he gets better." I nodded, because I was collapsing. And because, at that time, I believed her heart was pure. If I'd known what she was truly capable of, I would have never let her near those hospital papers. Before all of this, before the tubes, the whispers, the signatures, my life was ordinary. Messy, but loving. My husband, Mark, worked long shifts as a contractor. He wasn't perfect, impatient, sometimes distant, but he adored Daniel. And I was content. I spent my mornings in the kitchen, packing Daniel's lunch with peanut butter sandwiches cut into stars, humming as the kettle steamed. Evelyn lived 15 minutes away, in the old brick house Mark grew up in. She was the kind of woman who made her presence known before she spoke, that unmistakable floral perfume, that clipped voice that carried through walls. Still, I'd learned to respect her. She'd lost her husband young and raised Mark alone. Strength was her second skin. Our relationship was complicated but polite. She liked things done her way, and I'd grown used to biting my tongue. It kept the peace. Looking back, maybe that's where I went wrong, mistaking silence for harmony. The months before Daniel fell ill were simple. He was starting first grade, learning to write his name in big, looping letters. He'd burst into the house after school, his little backpack dragging behind him, shouting, "Mom! Grandma says I'm a genius." Evelyn would visit often, bringing him cookies or little puzzles, sitting with him for hours. I appreciated her help. I really did. But sometimes, she'd look at Daniel with this possessive tenderness. Like he belonged to her in some unspoken way. I brushed it off. After all, she was his grandmother. Love comes in strange shapes. Then Daniel got sick. It started with fevers. Then rashes. Then the hospital visits. Each day, I felt my control slip further away. And Evelyn, calm, composed Evelyn, stepped in like she'd been waiting her whole life to take charge. When Daniel was admitted for the 3rd time, Evelyn began handling the paperwork. She said she was just helping with forms, insurance approvals, hospital authorizations. Mark was working overtime, I was a wreck, and she seemed to know what she was doing. "You just sign where they tell you, darling," she said one night as I leaned over the clipboard. "It's all standard, medical consent, insurance, the usual." I didn't read. My hands were shaking. My son was hooked to and 4, crying for water. My world had narrowed to the sound of his breathing. So I signed. Days turned into weeks. Daniel improved slowly, miraculously. When the doctor said he could go home soon, I cried, hard, ugly tears that soaked my sleeves. Evelyn hugged me tightly, her voice trembling as she whispered, "You did so well, dear. You're such a good mother." I believed her. I needed to believe her. When we finally brought Daniel home, she insisted we stay at her house for a few days so she could help. I agreed. Her home smelled of lavender and lemon polish. It felt safe, familiar. She took care of everything. Meals. medicine schedules, late-night checks. She'd even sing to him when I was too tired to stay awake. It should have comforted me. But something in her eyes, unsettled me. The first sign came 2 weeks later. Daniel had a follow-up appointment with his pediatrician. I couldn't find his birth certificate in my folder, which was strange, I always kept it there. When I asked Evelyn about it, she smiled faintly and said, "Oh, I needed it for the hospital records." "Don't worry, dear, I'll give it back soon." I thought nothing of it. But then, little things started to shift. Letters arriving in her name. Phone calls she wouldn't take in front of me. Whispered conversations with someone on the other end. One afternoon, I overheard her in the kitchen, saying quietly, "Yes, I have full custody for now, the mother's unstable." My breath froze. I waited for laughter, for her to say it was a misunderstanding. But she didn't. When she saw me standing there, her face paled, only for a second, before she smiled again, too quickly. "Oh, that was about a friend's situation. You know, from church." I wanted to believe her. I needed to. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her tone. Calm. Certain. Like someone who knew exactly what she was talking about. The next morning, I checked Daniel's school bag, I don't even know why. Mother's instinct, maybe. Inside, tucked in the back pocket, was a letter from the local family court. It was addressed to Evelyn Parker. The subject line read, "Notice of guardianship hearing, minor, Daniel Parker." My knees nearly gave out. I confronted her that evening. My voice trembled as I held up the letter. "What is this?" I asked. "What is this, Evelyn?" She looked at it, then at me. Her eyes softened, and she sighed, not guilty, not afraid. Pitying. "Sweetheart," she said, reaching out to touch my arm, "I did what I had to. You weren't in any state to care for him. You were falling apart." My stomach dropped. "You adopted my child?" "I protected him," she said calmly. "Someone had to." Her words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. I remember staring at her, at this woman I had trusted, relied on, and feeling the air leave my lungs. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stood there, perfectly composed, as if she hadn't just ripped my life apart with one quiet sentence. "Protected him?" I finally whispered. "You took my child away from me." Evelyn sighed, the way you'd sigh when a child refuses to understand. "You're emotional. You always have been." "I didn't take him, dear. I just ensured he'd be safe if something happened to you. You were breaking down, crying constantly, barely eating. You signed the forms yourself. Remember?" I froze. The hospital papers. The signatures. The places she'd told me to just sign. My hand shook as I grabbed the back of a chair. "You tricked me." "I guided you," she corrected softly. "Daniel needs stability. You're not well, and Mark," she paused, her lips tightening, "Mark agrees this is for the best." That stopped me cold. "What do you mean, Mark agrees?" She smiled, almost gently. "He understands what's necessary for Daniel. You'll thank me one day when you can focus on getting better." Getting better. Like I was sick. Like grief had made me unfit to be a mother. I stormed out, heart pounding, Daniel's laughter echoing faintly from the living room where he was watching cartoons. I looked at him, my son, my entire reason for breathing, and for the first time, I saw how far she had pulled him into her orbit. "Grandma says she's my guardian now," he chirped innocently when I bent to hug him. "That means I get to live with her forever if you have to go somewhere." I smiled through the tears burning in my eyes. "We'll talk about that later, baby," I whispered. But inside, something snapped. That night, after Mark came home, I confronted him. We sat in our bedroom, the hum of the ceiling fan slicing through the thick silence. "Evelyn filed guardianship papers," I said quietly. "Did you know?" He hesitated, that awful pause where you see the truth forming behind the eyes. I knew she was thinking about it, he said finally. She said it was temporary, just to make sure Daniel could stay on her health insurance if something happened. She said you'd signed off. I cut him off. She lied. She made me sign those papers when I was out of my mind with worry. You believed her? Mark rubbed his forehead. Look, I thought it was just legal formality. She's my mom, she wouldn't. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. She would, Mark. She already did. She's trying to take our son. He didn't speak. That silence, his silence, broke something in me that had already been cracking. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my ID. The clerk, a kind older woman with glasses on a chain, tapped a few keys, frowned, then looked up at me. Yes, Mrs. Parker, there's an active guardianship petition filed by an Evelyn Parker. It lists you and your husband as the biological parents. She paused, lowering her voice. The hearing is in 2 weeks. My world tilted. I wasn't notified, I whispered. The clerk sighed. Mail might have gone to the address on file. It says, she squinted at the screen. Evelyn Parker's residence. Of course. The woman who wanted to steal my son had intercepted every letter meant to warn me. I left the office shaking, the papers clutched to my chest. For the next few days, I barely slept. I read through legal forums at 3 a.m, trying to understand what guardianship even meant, what my chances were. Every word blurred together: unfit parent, emotional instability, best interests of the child. Each phrase felt like a knife. When the hearing day arrived, I walked into that courtroom wearing my best dress, the one I'd worn to Daniel's kindergarten graduation. My hair was neat, my makeup simple. I looked like a woman holding herself together, even if inside I was falling apart. Evelyn sat on the other side with her lawyer. Mark sat between us, eyes on the floor. When the judge asked why she'd filed for guardianship, Evelyn's voice was calm and confident. Your Honor, she began, my daughter-in-law has been under extreme emotional distress since Daniel's illness. She's had trouble managing daily routines, missed work, and has shown signs of mental strain. My son and I feared for Daniel's stability. My jaw clenched. She made me sound unhinged. When it was my turn to speak, my voice trembled, but I forced myself to look at the judge. I was never told about this hearing. I didn't agree to any guardianship. I was tricked into signing hospital papers. My son belongs with me. The judge frowned, glancing between us. We'll need to see documentation, he said. Until then, temporary guardianship remains with Mrs. Evelyn Parker. I felt the blood drain from my face. Temporary. It sounded harmless, but it meant she had legal control. I turned toward Mark, whispering through clenched teeth, "Are you going to say anything?" He just stared at his hands. In that moment, I realized I was alone. Utterly, completely alone. That night, after the hearing, I packed my things. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just folded Daniel's tiny clothes into a suitcase and left them on his bed, next to his stuffed bear. Evelyn's house was only a few miles away, but it felt like a different world, one built on deception and polished lies. Mark tried to stop me at the door. Please, he said, don't make this worse. Mom just wants to help. Help? I turned to face him, my voice barely above a whisper. She's stolen our son, and you're letting her. He didn't have an answer. So I walked out. For the next week, I stayed at my sister's apartment downtown. It was small, cluttered, filled with the smell of instant coffee and lavender candles. She held me when I cried, but even she didn't fully believe how bad it was, not yet. Until one morning, she handed me her phone, eyes wide. "Isn't this your son?" she asked. It was a Facebook post, Evelyn's post. A smiling picture of Daniel at the park, captioned, "Feeling blessed to officially be his guardian." He's home now. My knees gave out. There it was. Proof. Public, polished proof that she had taken him from me, and wasn't planning to give him back. That's when something inside me hardened. No more tears. No more fear. If Evelyn wanted a war, I'd give her one, and I'd win it by the book. I woke up the next morning with a strange kind of calm, the kind that comes after you've cried every tear you can possibly shed. There's a moment when grief turns into resolve. That's where I was. Evelyn had her lawyers, her money, her influence in the community. But I had something stronger, the truth, and the heart of a mother who'd had everything ripped away. The first thing I did was call a family attorney. I remember my hands shaking as I dialed the number, my sister sitting beside me, silently squeezing my arm. The woman who answered, Ms. Reyes, had a voice that sounded like she'd been through 100 storms and survived them all. When I told her what had happened, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're not crazy, and you're not powerless. What your mother-in-law did is called fraudulent guardianship. But we'll need evidence." Evidence. The word was both terrifying and liberating. She told me to gather everything, hospital records, messages, any documents I'd signed under pressure. If she manipulated you into signing consent forms, Ms. Reyes said, and if you can prove you were in distress or misled, we can challenge the entire thing. I spent the next 2 days digging through every drawer, every folder, every hospital envelope. My hands were raw from rifling through papers. But buried between insurance forms and prescription notes, I found a copy of the hospital authorization, the one Evelyn had given me. And there it was, my signature under a line labeled Temporary Care Authorization. Below it, Evelyn's signature. And in small, faint print, may be used for court petition for temporary guardianship in the event of incapacitation. She had written me off as incapacitated. I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I took a photo, printed copies, and sent them to Ms. Reyes. She called within the hour. "This is enough to start," she said. "We'll file a petition to revoke guardianship and request an emergency hearing." I exhaled for the first time in weeks. But Evelyn didn't take it quietly. The day the court notice reached her, she called me. Her voice was steady, but there was a sharpness beneath it, the sound of someone who thought she'd already won. "So you've decided to make this ugly," she said. "I'm taking back my son," I replied. My voice didn't shake. "Not this time." "You're making a mistake," she said coolly. "The court will see that you're unstable, that you're lashing out. I have witnesses, doctors, friends. Everyone saw how you were falling apart when Daniel was sick." "Falling apart isn't the same as being unfit," I said quietly. She laughed, soft and cruel. "Oh, sweet girl. I'm only trying to protect him." Then she hung up. I remember staring at the phone, feeling a rush of both anger and pity. Evelyn didn't see herself as the villain. She saw herself as a savior. And that made her dangerous. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, affidavits, and sleepless nights. I started therapy, not because I was unfit, but because I needed strength. My therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Kim, helped me find my center again. "You've been surviving," she told me one session, "but now it's time to live your way back to your child." I wrote down every instance of Evelyn's manipulation. I saved voicemails. I even recorded a conversation where she told a family friend that she was grateful the law recognized her as Daniel's real guardian. Piece by piece, I built a case. The second hearing was different from the first. This time I wasn't shaking. I walked into that courtroom with Ms. Reyes beside me, her folders neatly labeled, her expression calm. Evelyn sat on the other side again, pearls around her neck, posture perfect, eyes cool. Mark was there too, sitting between us again, looking like a man who had lost his footing in both worlds. When the judge called my name, I stood. My voice was low, steady. "Your Honor, my mother-in-law used my son's hospitalization to gain guardianship without my knowledge. I was under emotional distress. I was told to sign routine papers while my child was gravely ill. I have evidence showing that the forms were misrepresented. Ms. Reyes presented the hospital document. The judge's brow furrowed as he examined it. Then she played the recording, Evelyn's voice, clear and smug. I'm grateful the law recognized me as Daniel's real guardian. The courtroom was silent. Evelyn shifted in her seat. The judge looked up. Mrs. Parker, he said slowly, did you misrepresent these documents when obtaining guardianship? Evelyn clasped her hands. Of course not, Your Honor. I did what I believed was best for my grandson. His mother was in no state to care for him. Did you or did you not inform her of the guardianship proceedings? Ms. Reyes cut in sharply. Evelyn hesitated, a small pause, but enough. The judge sighed, leaning back. This will require further review. But for now, the court suspends temporary guardianship until the matter is resolved. Suspended. It wasn't final victory, but it was a breath of hope, the first real one in months. When I walked out of that courtroom, the sun was setting, gold spilling through the courthouse steps. I looked up for the first time in a long time and felt something loosen in my chest. Ms. Reyes smiled. It's not over yet, but you've cracked her foundation. Keep steady. I nodded, clutching the court order. That night, I went to see Daniel. Evelyn opened the door, expression unreadable. I'm here to see my son, I said. Her jaw tightened, but she stepped aside. Daniel ran toward me, his little arms wrapping around my waist. Mom, he squealed. Grandma said you were mad at her. Are you mad at me too? My heart broke a little. I knelt down, brushing his hair back. Never, baby. Never at you. I love you more than anything. He smiled, resting his head on my shoulder. I love you too. Behind us, I could feel Evelyn's gaze, cold, calculating, but uncertain now. For the first time, she didn't look invincible. That night, as I held Daniel and watched him drift to sleep, I whispered a promise to myself. No one would ever come between us again. The battle wasn't over. But I'd learned something Evelyn never understood: a mother's love doesn't need permission, or paperwork, or approval. It just needs courage. It's strange how secrets rot in silence, until one day, they split open on their own. Evelyn's secret had lived too long in the shadows. And once light began to seep in, everything she built to look perfect started to crack. After the hearing, word spread faster than either of us expected. Small towns have long memories and quick tongues. People from church, neighbors, even Mark's co-workers, everyone seemed to have heard whispers that Evelyn had taken custody of her grandson behind his mother's back. At first, I was mortified. I didn't want people's pity. I didn't want to be the woman who lost her child. But as the story unfolded, in courtrooms, in hallways, in quiet conversations, pity turned to outrage. People began to see Evelyn differently. The first real fracture came at Sunday service. Evelyn had always been the picture of grace there, leading the women's prayer circle, baking for charity drives, standing proudly with Daniel by her side. But that morning, I walked into church with Daniel holding my hand. Heads turned. Murmurs swept through the pews. Evelyn stood near the altar, frozen for a moment. Then she smiled, that brittle, practiced smile, and approached me. Good morning, dear, she said softly, but her tone carried warning. What a surprise to see you here. I smiled back, just as calmly. Daniel wanted to come with me today. She turned to him. Sweetheart, go sit with Grandma, Daniel looked up at her, then at me. His hand tightened around mine. I want to stay with Mom. The silence that followed was heavy. The pastor's wife, standing nearby, frowned slightly, that small, judgmental frown that says something's not right here. Evelyn's lips twitched. Of course, dear, she said through a tight smile. Whatever makes you happy. We sat together in the front row. I could feel her eyes burning into the back of my neck the entire service. That week, Mark's sister, Jenna, came to see me. We hadn't spoken in months. She'd always been protective of their mother, and I never blamed her for taking Evelyn's side. But when she showed up at my sister's apartment, she looked different. Worn down. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. We sat at the kitchen table, mugs of coffee between us. She stared at her hands for a long time before speaking. "Mom told us you were unstable," she said finally. "That you weren't taking care of Daniel, that you'd signed him over willingly. But then I saw the court documents. You didn't even know." I nodded slowly. Tears welled in her eyes. She used to talk about how she saved Mark from a broken home after his father died. I think she believes she's saving Daniel from the same thing. That hit me like a quiet truth I didn't want to hear. Evelyn wasn't just cruel, she was wounded. Twisted by grief, clinging to control because she'd lost it once before. Still, knowing that didn't excuse her. "I can't let her rewrite our lives," I said softly. Jenna nodded. "I know. And I'll testify for you. She needs to face what she's done." The second hearing was public. Family members were called to speak. This time, I wasn't alone. Jenna sat behind me, my sister beside her. Evelyn walked in wearing navy blue, pearls shining against her collarbone. She looked composed, but her hands trembled as she adjusted her purse. The judge began by summarizing the findings: forged implications on hospital documents, a lack of informed consent, misrepresentation of parental capacity. Each word stripped another layer of her composure away. When asked to speak, I stood. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady, "my mother-in-law is not an evil woman. She's controlling. She's proud. But she's also someone who believes she knows what's best, even when it destroys the people she loves. I don't hate her. I just want my son back, without fear, without manipulation." The judge nodded. "And the father?" Mark stood slowly. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks, not since the last hearing. He looked tired, older somehow. "Your Honor," he said, clearing his throat, "I made the mistake of trusting my mother more than my wife. I thought she was helping us, but she wasn't. She was replacing us. I should have stopped it." I swallowed hard. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. Evelyn's head turned sharply, her eyes wide. "Mark," she hissed. "How can you?" "Mom," he said quietly, "please stop." The silence that followed was unbearable. For the first time, I saw fear, real fear, flash across her face. When the judge gave his ruling, I held my breath. The court finds that the guardianship was obtained under misleading circumstances. Full parental custody is restored to Mrs. Parker. The petition for guardianship is dismissed. My knees went weak. I gripped the bench in front of me, blinking through tears. It was over. But as I looked across the courtroom at Evelyn, shoulders stiff, eyes glistening though she refused to cry, I didn't feel triumph. Just sorrow. Because even when justice came, the family didn't walk out whole. Outside the courthouse, reporters from the local paper waited. I wasn't famous, but the case had stirred conversation about family rights and legal manipulation. One of them asked me, "What would you say to other mothers in your situation?" I hesitated, then said softly, "Trust your instincts. Read every word. Don't hand over power because someone says they love you. Love and control aren't the same thing." The quote ran in the paper the next day. And that's when the community truly turned. People stopped Evelyn at the market, not to gossip, but to question. To look at her differently. Her name, once associated with grace, now whispered alongside words like betrayal and possession. She withdrew from the church. Stopped hosting luncheons. Her garden, once the pride of the neighborhood, began to wither. I never wanted her punished publicly. But maybe that quiet isolation was the only thing that could make her see what she'd done. One evening, about a month later, she came to my door. It was raining. She stood under the porch light, her hair damp, her eyes weary. "Can I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She stepped inside, clutching a small box. These are Daniel's things, she said softly. Pictures, drawings, little things I kept when he was here. I thought they belonged with you now. Her voice cracked on the last word. I took the box, setting it gently on the table. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped softly on the windows. Finally, she said, I thought I was helping. I lost my husband, and I thought, if I could just protect Daniel, I'd never feel that helpless again. I looked at her, not as an enemy, but as a broken woman who'd gone too far trying to control fate. You can still be in his life, I said quietly. But on honest terms. No secrets. No control. Just love. She nodded, eyes glistening. I don't deserve it, but, thank you. Time has a strange way of softening even the deepest wounds. Not erasing them, just sanding down the edges until they stop cutting you every time you remember. It's been 8 months since that rainy night when Evelyn came to return Daniel's box. Since then, things haven't gone back to normal. But maybe normal was never what we needed. We've been learning how to build something new, something honest. Daniel started therapy. He used to wake up crying at night, asking if Grandma was going to take him away again. It broke me every time. But slowly, the nightmares stopped. He started drawing again, bright colors, families with smiles, stick figures holding hands. One day, he drew 3 people standing under a tree. He pointed to each one and said, that's you, that's me, and that's Grandma. We're happy now. I stared at it for a long time. For a child, forgiveness comes easier. Maybe because they haven't learned how to cling to pain yet. Evelyn called every few weeks at first. Polite, distant, careful. Always asking, how's my boy, but never pushing. Then, one Sunday, she invited us to dinner. I didn't say yes right away. My instinct was still guarded, like part of me expected her to try and control the narrative again. But Mark wanted to go. She's trying, Claire, he said quietly. Maybe this time, we can meet her halfway. So, we went. The house felt smaller somehow, not because of the walls, but because the pride that once filled it was gone. The portraits were still there, the neat lace curtains, the ticking clock. But there was no performance anymore. Evelyn greeted us with a cautious smile. She looked older, not in years, but in spirit. Her movements were slower, her voice softer. Dinner's ready, she said. The table was set simply, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. No fancy silver, no perfect presentation. Just food meant to be shared. Daniel chatted between bites, telling her about school, his art projects, how he'd joined the soccer team. Evelyn listened, nodding, occasionally reaching over to touch his hand. I watched them, half afraid, half hopeful. After dinner, while Daniel helped Mark with the dishes, she turned to me. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she began. About love and control. I met her eyes. And? She exhaled slowly. I think I confused the two my whole life. When Mark's father died, I thought if I could manage everything, every decision, every detail, no one could hurt us again. But all I did was build a cage for the people I loved. Her voice trembled. I'm sorry, Claire. Truly. The words hung in the air. For a long time I couldn't speak. Part of me had waited so long to hear that, and part of me still didn't trust it. But then I thought of Daniel's drawing. 3 people under a tree, smiling. Maybe forgiveness isn't about trust. Maybe it's about choosing peace for yourself. I believe you, I said quietly. And I forgive you. But we're going to take it slow. She nodded. Slow is good. A few months later, Evelyn started volunteering at a community center, helping other grandparents who were raising their grandkids after family loss. She said it helped her make sense of what she did. Sometimes she calls just to tell me about the kids she meets. There's pride in her voice again, not the kind that controls, but the kind that gives. And that feels like growth. Mark and I, meanwhile, had our own work to do. trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight. There were arguments, tears, and long silences. But one evening, after tucking Daniel in, Mark sat beside me and said, "I don't deserve this second chance, but I want to earn it." I didn't say anything, just took his hand. Because sometimes love isn't a grand gesture. It's the quiet decision to stay and do better. A year later, on Daniel's 8th birthday, we held the party at the park. Kids running everywhere, balloons tied to benches, laughter echoing through the trees. Evelyn came early, helping set up. She didn't try to direct or decide anything, she just asked where she could help. At one point, Daniel ran up, covered in frosting, and hugged her. "Grandma! This is the best birthday ever." Evelyn laughed through tears, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I think so too, sweetheart." I stood a few feet away, watching them. And for the first time in years, there was no fear. No anger. Just the soft ache of knowing we'd made it through something that could have destroyed us, and somehow, came out human on the other side. Later that evening, as the sun set and guests trickled away, Evelyn approached me with a small photo frame. Inside was Daniel's old drawing, the one with 3 figures under a tree. "I thought it belonged here," she said. I looked at the picture, at the uneven lines, the crooked smiles, the bright yellow sun. "Yeah," I whispered. "It does." She smiled, her eyes wet. "You know, I used to think forgiveness was about being forgiven. But I think it's really about learning how to give it, even when you don't deserve it." I nodded. That's how we all heal. We stood there for a while, silent, watching Daniel chase bubbles across the grass. The sky burned orange and pink above us, like everything broken was finally finding its color again. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Family isn't built on blood, or rules, or control. It's built on truth, and the courage to face it, even when it hurts. And love? Real love doesn't cage or claim. It gives you space to grow, and the grace to return. So when people ask how I found peace after what she did, I tell them. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself. And that's exactly what I did.